Good afternoon and welcome to Old School RC video number 3, taking place today in my garage. And it's a rather cool day. It's rather cool in my garage. It's probably about 45 degrees or so. But this is the best place to shoot this video. What I've got in my hands here is a balsa wood airplane. And yes, I'm going to be sometimes talking somewhat condescendingly to those new to the hobby and those very young that don't know what this is. This is actually what we used to do in the 80s, 90s, well, from time immemorial when flying began up until about the 2000s. This is how you flew. You had a balsa wood airplane that's light as a feather, and you had a glow-powered engine, or nitro fuel powered glow engine. The airplane I'm holding here is part of a Facebook marketplace purchase that I made several weeks ago, and this just so happens to be the fuselage, a really nicely built fuselage, and covered, at least most of it's covered, rendition of a SIG's Kadet Mark II, which was just a classic. It was an iconic airplane for many, many years, and it always will be. And so I'm trying to figure out here the best way to show you this, but this is how it came to me. Most of the fuselage is built covered, and the tail surfaces are covered and hinged, ready to go. So it's almost like an ARF until you see this. This is what we used to do to make airplanes. We didn't just go and buy them, pull them out of a box and throw them in the air and they flew. Building airplanes in these days took a lot of time and effort and actually a lot of patience. You had to learn a lot of things. It wasn't just unbox something and go fly. This is, as many of SIG's kits were called craftsman's kits. And at some point here I'll change the camera angle and we'll go through some of what's left of the box components, and I'll show you that. But I mean, this is just brings back a lot of really good memories for me because I remember doing this. Looks like one of the ribs here is broken on the tip. Doesn't have the cap strips on there yet. But I mean, this wing is probably 85%, 90% done, and it's got a little hanger rash. This kit and engine, this whole combination dates back to 1994, so it's been around a bit. So with that said, I'm going to change the camera angle and show you some of the box contents and show you what an old-time kit used to look like. Okay, so here's the box. This is a very typical airplane kit box from many years ago. Like I said, this particular box says this was printed in 1980. So this, I have a feeling the Kadet itself goes back much earlier than that, and I believe that this was actually an engine or an airplane, yes, designed by Claude McCullough. He was one of the primary designers of airplanes at SIG for many, many years. It says ideal for RC for beginners. I mean, you walk into a hobby store years ago and you just see, walls filled with kits, and it got you excited. So anyway, this is a typical box. Always had these nice colored graphics, and then of course what's left in here, you always have plans, and these craftsman's kits were called craftsman's kits because most of them were just sticks. I mean, I remember building a SIG Smith mini plane, and it was literally just a box of sticks. There was very little sheeting material at all. So that was sort of that. Here, you had always came with a nice instruction manual on exactly how to build. Let me get closer here so you can maybe look at this. SIG's instructions were always some of the best. Very well written. Had a lot of images that show you along the way. I mean, there was so much to learn back then about mechanics and engineering and assembling things. It was just fantastic. And then of course here they got the complete parts list here, so that if you needed to ever decided to build another one yourself or repair as necessary, it even told you exactly the types of sticks, how many sticks of certain sizes there were and what they were used for. I mean, here are the plywood parts. There'd be some pre-stamped or cut plywood parts, and I mean it was just fantastic back then. Now the next thing that was always really interesting is a thing that I loved, one of the things I loved the most was getting the plans out. They'd have to learn how to read plans also, and there were many times before I actually built a plane, I would unroll the plans and just hang them up on my walls and just sit there and kind of, as I walked into the room, I just study them. Just get to know the plans intimately. So that was the wing plan. Let's see, what do we got here? This is probably a stabilizer, so tail feathers, elevator, and you built right over these plans. So basically what you do is you'd have a nice big building board, and you get T-pins and wax paper, and I put wax paper over the top of it, and then you just pin your wood right to it, cut it, and glue it in place. I mean, it was really something, because it took a lot of effort and time to build these planes, and that's why it made it so much more special when you went out to the field for the first time and flew, because there was always that risk. Am I going to crash? I mean, there was always a real risk. So here's a top view of the fuselage, where it shows how to install the servos and the push rods, how to route them. But I mean, that was part of the hobby, was the risk involved. You spend your money and a lot of time building these planes, and then there was always that risk that you might actually get out there and dust it for the very first time. Now with these foam planes, I don't know, it seems like it'd be very difficult to destroy a foam airplane with batteries in it. Although I have seen it done, but this particular one did come with covering. Yes, so when you were done building it, you actually had to cover it too, which was a whole other skill set that many people mastered, some didn't. I got to be pretty darn good at it. What this is a plastic film that has a backing on it that you take off, and it's got heat activated adhesive, so that when it gets on the wood, you use a heat gun or iron, and it sticks to the wood, and it really was an art form. In fact, that fuselage was done very, very well, probably done a lot better than I could have ever done. Now the only problem with what I have here is that you saw the wing. The wing doesn't have the ailerons installed, but it also doesn't have any more of this red monocoat. And that was interesting because right here on here it says true red was the color. I don't know if this is something that SIG put on here, or if that was what the owner of this plane put on there. So I was almost considering finishing up, at least doing some videos on covering that wing, until I found out that there was no more red covering. And the difficult thing about it is that I don't know that Top Flight Monocoat's available anymore. I mean, you might be able to find it, but the last few times that I actually used Top Flight Monocoat 6 or 8 years ago, it was phasing out then, and something happened to it. Either they cheapened it or something, or maybe it just gets old over time, but it wasn't adhering well, and it just didn't have the same heat resistant bending and forming capability that it had 20-30 years ago or so. It just didn't seem the same. In fact, I bought some and I was so disappointed with it I didn't even use it. I had to find some other kind of covering material. But so anyway, this has been episode number 3 of Old School RC, and this is what building and what airplanes actually look like back then. So hope you enjoyed watching.